Hey friends, it's Lauren. Welcome to my craft room for a Pretty Pink Posh Halloween card. And I'm going to be creating some monsters for today's card using patterned paper. I'm going to use a sentiment from the Halloween Corners stamp set, so I have that and its coordinating dies ready. But most of all, we're going to be focusing on the Build a Monster dies. I have some pattern paper that has been in my stash for far too long. It's Halloween themed, but I really liked the unique colors of this combination, so I used it as inspiration for my Distress Oxides to create my own background using the Halloween Words stencil. So I'm going to start with my background. I have a piece of white cardstock and I'm going to trim it to be A2 in size, so 4¼ by 5½ inches, but I will end up using those stitch torn rectangles once I'm done to cut it down. So I'm going to just use some repositionable tape to attach my paper to the back side of my Halloween word stencil. You know, I love my stencil grip mat, but today I was keeping it easy by just adding some tape to the back. So if you don't have a sticky grip mat for stenciling, this is an easy way to help keep your stencil in place while you are stenciling. I have Distress Oxides in Ripe Persimmon, Mustard Seed, Pumice Stone, and Peacock Feathers. Again, inspired by the pattern paper that I have. Again, it's old, so can't tell you what it is because you can't find it anymore. So definitely use that paper you know you've been hoarding in your stash if you want to recreate this card. So I'm starting with that Ripe Persimmon, adding the color to the top of my stencil and blending that into Mustard Seed. Then I'll blend that into Pumice Stone and finally Peacock Feathers. I do go back and forth between the two colors if I need it to have a better blend, but overall it doesn't need to be too detailed as it's just showing through our fun sentiment background. I'll go ahead and peel off that paper and I'm going to wash off my stencil and my glass mat after I run it through my die cutting machine with the largest stitch torn rectangle. So after that, I'm going to add some black splatter. The pattern paper I'm using has a little bit of black polka dotness to it. So I grabbed a black brush pen that has just kind of like a water-based ink in it. And I'm going to just get the brush filled with the ink and then tap it onto my background. Just a fun way to use those brush markers you might have in your stash to add some splatter. I'll go ahead and set that aside to dry, and I did a ton of die cutting with the monster dies. I did every die in that stash one time, and I'm going to add them and create my fun little monster. So I have my little oval monster here out of that yellow pattern paper, and I'm adding his fun little big eyeball. Definitely going to give me some Mike Wazowski vibes when I'm done. The more I was building the first two monsters, the more I wanted to make a fandom card inspired by Monsters Inc. So you may see that from me in the future. I added this cute little toothy smile to my monster, and I remember that I wanted to use a marker to darken up the mouth part so that the little tooth really kind of stood out on the mouth. So I did use a very pale gray cardstock to die cut his mouth, and adding in that black or dark gray alcohol marker just creates a little bit of a distinction between the mouth and the tooth. I added in his cute little hands and now his feet. I went with blue. I just wanted to create kind of some fun, funky colored monsters, just using my imagination when I was picking out the paper to add in the different pieces to my monsters. And since I was thinking Mike Wazowski for this card, I just put on 2 of the 3 horns, and then I grabbed a pale pink alcohol marker to add in some pink cheeks, and I'm also going to bring in a white gel pen to add some highlights to my die cuts. I just like doing this even to die cuts, not just for when I color, because it just gives my images a fun little bit more cartoony look to them. At least to me, that's the impression I get when I add white gel pen. Once I'm happy with how this little monster turned out, we're going to move on to the second one. So for this monster, he's giving Sully vibes to me, so I wanted to kind of follow those colors as well. So definitely went with a blue or more teal peacock feathery color for his body. And then as I was assembling him, I noticed that when I put his little stomach on and his arms, he kind of looks like a penguin. So you could definitely modify these dies and how you use them to create new and fun things. Like definitely could make a penguin from some of these dies in the set. This time I remembered to color his mouth before gluing it on, so I have his little toothy smile, and I love that the eyes are different sizes, just gives them a really fun personality. And fun fact about me, I used to be a puppeteer when I was in high school, so I have taken a puppet making class before in the past, and the advice they gave when adding eyes to the puppet is you want them to look a little bit cross-eyed. It just makes the puppet, or I guess in this point my monster, more like he's looking at you instead of looking past you, if that makes sense. So when you're adding the inside of your eyes, like I'm doing here for my third monster, you want them to be slightly cross-eyed. It just gives the impression that they're looking at you instead of something around you. And I also kind of lower them just a tiny bit. But you could definitely obviously give your monsters a fun personality and make them look in all kinds of fun directions. But that's just my advice if you're trying to create it so the monster is looking at your card receiver rather than something else around it. I'm adding in the feet and arms and the cute little kind of antenna looking pieces to this last monster. I think he's the funniest just because of his stripes. So now that my monsters are all done, I want to also work on my sentiment. So I took some black cardstock, and sometimes when I run my embossed sentiments through my die cutting machine, it can kind of smear my embossing powder because I'm so impatient and haven't let it dry fully. So I actually did my die cutting first. So I apologize, I'm a little off camera there, but I die cut the Happy Halloween first and then use my Misty to stamp it with some clear embossing ink, and I'm adding white embossing powder to my sentiment. I'm going to use my heat gun to melt down that embossing powder, and I really love how white powder just really pops off the black cardstock, and again bringing in more of that black to my card. I have a top folding A2 card base and I'm ready to start layering everything together. So I'll go ahead and adhere my background right to my card base just using a tape runner to add my adhesive. And I'm going to center that onto my card base, just making sure I have a little bit of that white border evenly around all four sides. Now originally I was going to layer everything onto this pattern paper that I've created, but when I have a busy background and a busy foreground, because these monsters are with pattern paper, I find that you kind of get lost, right? There's just too much to look at, and the best way I think to kind of break that up is to use some vellum. So I ran the second largest stitch torn rectangle through with some vellum, and this is going to be what's in between my monsters and my background. It just adds a little bit of softness to break up the busyness. So I used my tape runner to attach my cute little green monster to the back and a little bit up, and I have foam adhesive on the back side of my other two monsters, and I'm going to layer them on top of my larger monster, just kind of stacking them so one is a little bit higher up than the other. And I'm going to do my best to not rip my monsters off my glass mat. But there I have the placement of my three monsters, and I'm really liking how those are looking. So then I'll add my sentiment just above my tallest monster, trying to center that onto the vellum as well. Now the reason why I adhered everything to the vellum first is because I wanted to add adhesive behind everything, and I didn't want it to poke through or be seen through the vellum. So I'm using everything that I have on the vellum as a guide of where I can add adhesive, and then I'm adhering that to the center of my card. That finishes off my funky monster Halloween card. Again, I use pattern paper to die cut all of my monsters. I hope you had fun with me today creating this unique Halloween card. Let me know which of these three monsters are your favorite. I'm pretty sure mine is the blue one in the back. I think he looks the most like Sully from Monsters, Inc., and I definitely want to make a fandom card with this set in the future. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!